us to waste our time, waste our resources, my dear friends? What is the need for us to waste our resources? Here here this sampling method becomes very very important because it helps us in selecting our sample size or the population from whom we are going to gather the information, and the results will be applied to the entire section of population. For example, let us think that we want to study the voting behavior of the students who are pursuing their graduation or post graduation course at Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University. So we see that the people are scattered across the Telangana state as well as in Andhra Pradesh state. So now going to each and every respondent, each and every student and gathering the information, it is merely impossible, or it is very, very difficult for us to gather the information from each and every student because they are scattered across two states, my dear friends. For that reason, what we do better, it is easy or it is convenient for us to have a appropriate sample size, gather the information on that, and apply it to the entire population, my dear friends. Now, let us discuss the meaning of sampling. If you are having the book, you can refer page number 68. So, in social sciences, my dear friends, the researcher will depend on first-hand information for most of the cases. Remember that. So, the researcher will go to the people and he himself or herself is going to gather the data from the people directly. We call it as primary data. And this primary data will be related with the research problem or the topic which we have selected. So, here the sources can be the individuals, it can be the household as a unit, or a group, or an organization, or as a village, and so on, my dear friends. Whenever we go for pre-poll surveys or post-poll surveys, at the time we are going to identify the individuals who have exercised their voting, who have gone and cast their vote after the post-poll elections or pre-poll elections. We are going to the people who are eligible to exercise their vote or who are eligible. And when we talk about census reports, every 10 years, the government of India is going to gather the information. At that time, they are going to take the household as a unit. So, based on the studies, it can be an individual or it can be a household or it can be a group of people or village or nation and so on, my dear friends. The data sources are referred to the individual, the family, or the group, household. All these are treated as the units or referred as the units of the study, my dear friends. And these units of study may vary from study to study depending on the objective of the research problem. It can be an individual, an institution, or anything, my dear friends. And a sample is a representative from the larger population. The assumption is that the characteristics of the population sample or the sample which is selected is almost similar to the characteristics of the entire population. We assume that the characteristics are same of the units to that of the total population. So doing the study on that sample, and we can whatever the results are there, we can apply to the entire population, my dear friends. So this about the meaning of sample. Then go for the aims of sampling. As the population is scattered in a larger population, gathering the information from them will become a difficult task. It takes time, it is costlier. For that reason, we go for this sampling method. The main purpose of sampling is to make an inference almost uh, about unknown parameters from a measurable sample statistic. The sampling method is used to test a statistical hypothesis relating to a population or to the population. A sample is drawn and the primary data is gathered from the respondents, and after that the data is analyzed, and based on this, my dear friends, based on the statistical test, we are either going to accept our hypothesis or reject our hypothesis, my dear friends. Then what is this sample? What is the Let us see some of the definitions of that. According to P.V. Young, A sample is a miniature picture of the entire group from which a sample is taken. It is a miniature picture, nothing but a small portion, my dear friends, of the entire population. According to Webster Dictionary, a sample is a finite part of a statistical population whose properties are studied to gain information about the entire population or about the whole, my dear friends. So here, whenever we are going to gather the information, my dear friends, there are two methods. One is census method and the other one is sampling method. Whenever you want to gather the information from almost all the units of the population, nothing but all the population or the units of population in a particular geographical area, at the time we go for census method. The government of India, every 10 years, they try to gather the information of all the households across the country to study their social, economical condition, my dear friends, and they're going to come up in the form of census reports that we call it as census method. So in the census method, my dear friends, in the census method, there are two methods to select the respondents, even like not picking them, but gathering the information. One is de facto method and the other one is de jure method. DEFACTO, de facto, and the other one is de jure, DEJURE, de jure method. In the de facto method, my dear friends, wherever the researcher finds the respondents, he gathers the information then and there itself. Then we call it as de facto method. For example, the researcher is going in the bus stop or in the railway station. At the time he found a person, he asks the person and he tries to gather all the information then and there itself wherever he met. We call it as de facto method. But in most of the time, my dear friends, or in most of the cases, we don't use this de facto method. Do you know why? Because it may give scope for duplicacy of data. For example, think I went to Secunderabad railway station, and there a researcher found me, and he asked the information, and I have provided all the information. And from there, I have gone to the Nalgonda or else Warangal or some other station, and there is one more researcher, and he came to me and asked the details. I also gave the details there also. So my data is there in Hyderabad. At the same time, it is there in the other cities too. So obviously, there is going to be duplicacy of data. We are not going to get the genuine information, my dear friends. For that reason, this de facto method has been kept aside. Then we have the other one, de jure method. In this method, my dear friends, the researcher will go to each and every household, and when the people are residing at their home, at the time he gathers the information from those people, my dear friends, then we call it as de jure method, journey, going to the people and gathering the information. De fact, wherever you find by default, that we call it as. So de facto method, wherever you meet, and the de jure method, we go to the people's house and we gather the information so that there will not be any duplicacy of data. We can also verify the information, my dear friends. So we have census method. The other one is when there is no need for us to have the entire population to be studied. At the time we go for this sampling method. In this sampling method, we are going to have a small group of individuals who are selected for the study, and we are going to gather the information, and the results are generalized, and the results are applied to the entire population, my dear friends. So in terms of this sampling method, we have the census as well as sampling method. Now let us discuss about the characteristics of sample. The first one, it must be representative. When you're going to take population, for example, when you took the rice, it may be of one quality. But when you go into the society, my dear friends, we people are stratified by number of things like boy and girl. Right now we have three genders, male, female, and third gender, which is being accepted. We're also stratified based on religion, Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Isai. We are stratified based on caste system. We are stratified based on our educational levels. We are stratified based on the location where we reside, rural, urban, tribal. And even in the cities also, my dear friends, in the metropolitan cities like Jubilee Hills, Banjara Hills, and middle class areas or else slums and so on. So based on there are plenty of things which are going to stratify us. So if you're not going to have the right people with the specific features to be studied at that time, our study will be a failure. So when you're going to select the people, all the people must be representative. For example, I want to take the opinion of the people who are residing in Jammu and Kashmir in Article 370 and 35A. So I have to go to the to the state or union territories, Jammu and Ladakh, and I have to go there and I have to take the opinion of the people who are residing in Jammu and Kashmir, not the people who are residing in the rest of the 27 states and 7 union territories, my dear friends. So my duty is to go there because those people are feeling the pain or whether they're happy. I have to ask them. So it must be representative one. Remember that the first one is the sample which is selected for the study should be representative one. They need to have the same features like or same characteristics. So then it is going to lead to the validity of the sample because it helps us in getting accurate data and it also helps in precision. The second one is accuracy. It is defined as the degree to which bias is absent. So whenever we are going to select the people, it must be free from bias. It must not be like I'm going to select my people who belongs to my community or to my caste or to my region or regionality or so on, my dear friends. There must not be any bias. There must not be any bias while selecting the respondents for the study. The third one is precision because sample must yield precision. It is measured by the standard error and or standard deviation of the sample estimate. The smaller the standard error or estimate, the higher is the precision of the sample, my dear friends. And the last one is size, sample size. A good sample must be adequate in size in order to be reliable. If the sample is very, very less, if the sample size is very, very less, then you will not be able to gather the information. And if the sample is very, very huge, it takes a lot of time. It also can lead to deviation, my dear friends. So these are the four characteristics of a sample: representativeness, accuracy, precision, as well as size. Now let us see the importance of sampling in social science research. Collecting or gathering the data from all the units of the population. Analyzing the data is a difficult task. It takes time, it requires more money, it requires more human resource. For that reason, we go for this sampling method. So here we are going to use certain methods or techniques, sampling techniques, which are used to find representative samples so that we can avoid bias. So whenever you are going to have the list of the people with the specific features to be studied, at that time we go for probability sampling. Under probability sampling, we are going to have certain techniques by which we are going to derive a population size or selecting the population, my dear friends. So our duty is to use sampling techniques for getting representative sample. At the same time, we can avoid bias too. Sometimes it is often impracticable and sometimes undesirable to try and study the entire population because it may consist hundreds and thousands of people and it will be difficult for them. That's the reason why we say it is impracticable. And the next one is we are going to have a sample size that is selected for the study, which can have a significant impact on the quality of the findings. Because if you're going to have a small sample, then you can gather the information thoroughly, you can verify the data thoroughly, and you can study it in an effective way. So the results will be qualitative one. And then next one is sampling bias can occur when we are going to select the respondents. So our duty is to ensure that the sampling bias can be reduced. Now let us make some assumptions about sampling techniques. These are only the assumptions, remember. because sometimes there can be human error, there can be bias or in selecting the respondents and so on. But we are going to have some pre-assumptions in terms of sampling techniques. The first one is we assume that population of a study consists of units which are similar in the characteristics, and certain units can help us in gathering the information because they are representative in nature, representative of the entire population. That is the first assumption. We are thinking that is only the assumption. The next one is it is possible to have a sample that represents the population as a whole. The sample study provides an estimate which can be tested for its strength using statistical tests. Then the size, reliability, and representative nature of the units drawn into a sample are important in sampling. And the last one is selection of sample has to adhere to the principles of random sampling procedures of probability sampling techniques. So we are going to have this assumption saying that we are going to have the right population size for doing the study. Now let us see what is the sample size and how to get the sample. There are two major factors affecting the power of the study, that is, the sample size and the effect size. The larger the sample size is, the smaller the effect size. If the sample size is greater, then the effect size is going to be smaller. And if the sample size is too small, my dear friends, then we can detect large effect size, my dear friends. Now, let us discuss how to decide the sample. When the selected sample needs to be segregated into smaller clusters involving comparison of clusters, a large sample would be appropriate. So if you're going to have plenty of population with different features to be studied at the time, a huge population or a larger population would be appropriate. For example, I want to study the perception of students residing in rural and urban areas in different districts of Telangana state. Then obviously the sample size must be larger because I have to touch each and every district from Telangana state. I cannot have one person from one district and I cannot collect the opinion of the people. Remember that. So whenever you want to have clusters, whenever you want to gather the information from different sections of people, it is better to have a larger sample. And in the longitudinal studies, if you want to do the studies for longer period, may not be at a time for 1 or 2 months, but if you want to do the study for years together, for longer period, at that time, it is better to have a small sample size. For example, Americans and Germans together, they have done a study on smoking, whether smokers will have the cancer or even the non-smokers will have cancer. So they have taken two groups of people. One is who are smokers, and the other group who are non-smokers, but their ancestors were smokers. And they have done the study on them for 30 years, not for 1 day or 1 month, my dear friends. They have done the study on this group for 30 years. And after doing the study on this group, two groups, after 30 years, they have found that around 56 point change of the people who are smokers, they had tobacco related issues like mouth cancer, lung cancer, and so on. Whereas the rest of the 43 point change percent of the people who are non-smokers, but their ancestors, their parents or grandparents, they were smokers. They also had tobacco-related issues, my dear friends. So if you're going for a longitudinal study for a longer period, you need to meet the people frequently, gather the information. So obviously it takes a lot of time, everything. So you'll not be able to concentrate on them. So it is better to have a smaller sample size for longitudinal studies. Then, if you are going to do a study on heterogeneous groups, different section, not same features, but different qualities, different characteristics of people, at the time, larger sample is required. And for homogeneous group, similar, only one group, at the time, a smaller sample size is okay, my dear friends. So these are the four things which we need to keep in mind. Remember, when we are going to derive our sample size. And the formula to calculate the sample size, capital N is equal to small n divided by 1 plus n into E square, where small n represents total population, E represents degree of freedom, which is equal to 0.05. By using this formula, we can calculate what must be our sample size. Remember that. Capital N represents sample size. Small n represents the total population with the specific features to be studied. Then E is nothing but degree of freedom, which is equal to 0.05, my dear friends. By using this formula, we can calculate our sample size. But in social sciences, my dear friends, it comes around 10% if you're going to use this formula. If you want to conduct a study across the country, right now the population is nearly 138 crores, and even 138 crores, 10% of that, it becomes 13.8 crores. Even gathering the information from them becomes a huge task, remember that. For that reason, there are two statisticians named Rees and Morgan. These two statisticians have given a table. If the population size is so and so, what must be the sample size? If you see in your book page number 72, you'll find the table. Rees and Gregor has given a table. If the population size is 10, then your sample size will be 10. That means you're going to gather the information from all the 10 people. And if the population size is 1 lakh members, then your sample size will be only 384, not even 10%. That means only 384. These are two statisticians who have derived a population size, sorry, sample size based on the size of the population. So using this table, we can also derive our sample size for our study, my dear friends. Now let us discuss about the advantages of sampling. The first thing is that because we are going to do the study on a smaller sample size, smaller population, it is going to save our time. It is going to save our time. The second one is it is also going to save our money because we spend a lot of money on collecting the information from the people. Going to the people, that means you're going to spend on transportation. You have to go and stay there for some time, so you're going to pay for your accommodation, for food, all these things. So it is going to take time. So obviously it also invest, you have to invest a lot of money. So it is going to save our time. It saves time, it saves our money. At the same time, it also helps us to gather the population in a shorter period who are scattered in a large area too, because only limited people, even though they are scattered in different areas, we go and gather the information from the people. So these are the three major advantages of sampling. But at the same time, my dear friends, it also has its own disadvantages. The first one is it can also be prone to bias, because sometimes the researcher may not follow the probability sampling procedures. Obviously, what happens? So it may lead to bias. The next one is sampling is complex as individuals or households vary on various parameters. On various parameters. So it will be very difficult for us to arrive at a homogeneous category and select a sample. For example, when I go to the village or in the urban center, uh, all the people who are there, they may belong to different faith, different occupations, different caste groups, and so on, my dear friends. So it is almost merely impossible for me to have a homogeneous category. So that is also one of the problem in terms of sampling. And the last one is it may also lead to sampling errors, my dear friends. Okay, so these are the three disadvantages of sampling. There can be researchers bias, it will be difficult for us to have homogeneous category, and the last one is it may also have errors. Now let us discuss some of the concepts used in sampling. The first one is universe. We also call it as population. Universe or population is nothing but the entire group of units which we are going to focus in our research study. For example, I'm going to study the opinion of students studying in Hyderabad in Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University. So all the students who are studying in Hyderabad under Ambedkar Open University, all they are going to become the universe or population, the area which consists of the entire population or units on whom we are going to study. that becomes our universe or population. And if I'm going to study the about the students' opinion, studying under B.R. Ambedkar Open University across Telangana, then Telangana is going to be my universe or population. Remember that. If I'm going to study the opinion of people on the opinion of people on present elections across the country, then entire country is going to be my universe or population. So wherever the entire units or population is there, that is going to be our universe or population, my dear friends. The next one is sample size. These are the units who are selected from the population units. They are known as sample. They are known as sample. The number of units selected for the study from the entire population, we call it as sample size. And the people who are selected are called as sample units or sample. Now, we also have a sampling frame. It consists of all the list of all the units of the population from which the sample can be drawn. For example, I said I want to gather the information or opinion of people studying in Hyderabad under B.R. Ambedkar Open University. That means in the sampling frame, I'm going to get the list of all the students who are there in Hyderabad pursuing under Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University. So from whom I'm going to pick my sample size or sample. That entire list of the people is called as sampling frame. When we talk about sampling frame, um, we are going to have three things. We are going to take three things into consideration. The first one, it should include all the individuals or units in the target population. Next one, we have to exclude all the individuals or unit who are not in the target population. For example, I want to do the study on the opinion of Muslims on reservation system. So who must be my respondents, guys? Not Hindus, neither Christians. It must be only Muslims, my dear friends. So if I'm when I'm going to select the people, I'm going to remove rest of the people because they are not a part of my sample, my dear friends. So first one is we have to take all the individuals. We have to include all the individuals or units logically. Second one is exclude all the individuals who are not in the target population. And third one is include accurate information about the individuals or units in the population. These are the three things which we need to keep in mind whenever we talk about sampling frame so that we can select the right sample for our study. The next one is we also have the concept of sampling error. The error arises in the selection of units. So when you're going to commit any mistakes, when you're going to select the units, my dear friends, we call it as sampling error. In order to overcome sampling error, the researcher has to adopt probability sampling techniques in the selection of the sample. Also, the researcher must use the sampling frame to select sampling units from the total population or entire population, my dear friends, so that we can reduce sampling error. As the sample size increases, my dear friends, the sampling error can be reduced. If the sample size is huge, at the time the sampling error can be reduced. Sampling error arises due to two reasons. The first one is biased error. It arises as a result of any bias or prejudice of a researcher in the selection of the unit. So that means the researcher himself is going to commit the mistake while selecting the units. Whereas sometimes we may also have unbiased error. It may be either accidental or arise in the natural course of events without any bias or prejudice of the researcher, my dear friends. There are two types of sampling error which may happen. One is biased error and the other one is unbiased error. Now let us go for the methods of sampling. There are two methods, two important methods of sampling, my dear friends. The first one is probability sampling. This sampling, whenever the researcher is going to have a complete information about the people with the specific characteristics or features to be studied at the time, they will employ probability sampling. In our 10th class, we have studied that if I'm going to toss a coin, the chances of getting heads or tails is 50-50 or 1 by 2. We know that the coin has two faces. If I'm going to put on a dice, the chance of getting any face is 1 by 6. We know that it has 6 faces. The same way, when the researcher has the list of people with the specific features to be studied, at the time we go for probability sampling method, my dear friends. And if the researcher is not going to have any information about the exact number of people with the specific features to be studied, at the time he or she will employ non-probability sampling. Now let us go in depth into this probability sampling. That is lesson number 9, unit 9, probability sampling. So whenever we are going to have the exact number of people with the specific features to be studied, at the time we go for probability. The beauty of probability sampling is that each and every unit has equal chances of being represented in the study. There will not be any bias, or else the bias can be reduced to zero, my dear friends. Okay. So according to Black and Champion, there are four prerequisites of a probability sampling. There are four prerequisites of a probability sampling. First one is we need to have a complete list of the subjects, nothing but the people who are there in the universe with the specific features to be studied. So you need to have a complete list. That is a prerequisite. If you don't have the list, you cannot go for probability sampling. Second one is we need to have the size of the universe. It must be known how many people are there. Okay, you need to have the complete list. That means you are going to have the size of the universe. The third one is you must know what is the desired sample. That must be specified. Just now we discussed like we are going to have a formula to calculate the sample size, or else Chris and Morgan, they have given a table. So by which you're going to define your sample size. So we need to mention what will be our appropriate sample size. We are going to specify that. And the last one is each element or unit must have equal chances of being selected. So these are the four prerequisites according to Black and Champion for employing probability sampling. Now let us discuss about the types of probability sampling. My dear friends, there are 5 types of probability sampling. There are 5 types of probability sampling. It is there in page number 78 in your book. The first one is simple random sampling. The first one is simple random sampling. In the simple random sampling, my dear friends, it takes a small random portion of the entire population to represent the entire data set. The simple random, in the simple random sampling, um, each and every individual has equal chance of being selected. That means there is non-zero probability of being selected into the sample. The process of selection of a unit is random. But in practice, the random sample usually is a representative sample and gives reasonable, accurate data, my dear friends. The sample units are selected by means of number of methods like lottery method, uh, pricking blindfolded, tippet stable, computer personal identification numbers, or so on. Let us discuss about this lottery method and tippet stable. Guys, at some time, or like whenever we have festivals, like at the time, you must have seen the shopping malls putting on some prizes, like you're going to have cars, or else they say that you're going to get gold of worth 1 crore rupees, something like. You must have seen some offers or some prizes. And what is the method they are going to use to select the prizes better? Lottery method. First, when the people are going to select the, sorry, purchase the garments or anything of worth so and so, they are going to give a coupon to the people, customers, and the customers are going to write their name, their mobile number, and they are going to fold it and they are going to keep it in a container. And on the specific day, uh, they will ask a neutral person to come, mix all the chits thoroughly, and then they are going to pick the chits against the number of prizes announced by the shop or anything. The same way here, what we do, we take we ask all the respondents to either write their names on the piece of paper, or else write their ID number, or else mobile number or Aadhaar number and so on, and ask them to fold it and keep into the box. After keeping that, we are going to ask a neutral person and come and pick the chits against the sample size, the number of sample size. If you want to interview 10 people, then you will ask a neutral person to pick 10 chits from the entire box, and whose number or whose name is there on the chits, you are going to select the people for our study that we call it as lottery method. So here also each and every person is getting equal chances of being selected, my dear friends. All the names are included, kept into the container, mixed it thoroughly, and we are going to pick certain numbers against our sample size, and we are going to select the people whose name is there on the sheet for our study. Then the next one is Tippett's table. Tippett has identified 40 plus thousand numbers using the numbers. For example, 1 to 100 he has said. For example, मान के चलो 1 to 100. Then I'm going to ask you, tell me one number. Tell me one number of your choice, like from 1 to 9. Then you may say 1. So I'm going to select the respondents with the number 1. 1, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Then 21, 31, 41, 51, 61, 71, 81, 91, and then 100. So the people with their rule numbers or with the mobile numbers, I'm going to say this slide. So those people are selected for the study, and if it is equal to the sample size, then well and fine. Or else then again I ask one more number, and using that method I'm going to select the respondents for the study, my dear friends. We also have this Tippett's table. So the same way we can also use identification number, Aadhaar number, or else driving license number, and so on for picking our respondents. Then we call this method as simple random sampling. In page number 79, you must have also seen use of computers. We also have Excel, like we can enter all the numbers of the people in that, and then by using the formulas we can also select our sample size. Then the second one is stratified random sampling. Before going for sampling, we are going to stratify the people. That means we are going to separate them on certain conditions, like male, female, or else rural urban areas, or else like literates, illiterates, and so on. Or else I'm going to stratify the people based on religion, based on caste, anything. And then I'm going to gather the people, select the people for my study. Then we call it as stratified, and then randomly selecting the people. We call it as stratified random sampling. Stratified random sampling is of two types, my dear friends. It is of two types. One is proportionate stratified random sampling, and the other one is disproportionate random stratified random sampling. First one is disproportionate and the other one is proportionate. In the disproportionate, for example, I want to gather the information from four religious groups: Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Isai. If we see these four groups, their population size is entirely different. You see around 80%, 80 plus percent are Hindus, then around 10%, 10, 11% are Muslims, then around 7 to 8% are Christians, and the other religious groups are less than 3%, 4% of the total population. So here I'm not going to take that population into account. I'm going to simply say, I'm going, for example, I want to interview 100 people, 25 Hindus, 25 Christians, 25 Muslims, 25 Sikhs, like. So I'm going to simply say, because it is easy for me, 100 divided by four groups, so each group 25. It is not in proportionate with the population size. We call it as disproportionate. We call it as disproportionate stratified random sampling. But if the sample size is in proportionate with the size of population. For example, Hindu population is 82% of the total population. So out of 100 sample, I'm going to select 82 Hindus for my study. Muslims population is 13%. So I'm going to select 13 people. So 82 plus 13, 95. I'm saying roughly. Then Christians are only 3%. Then 85, 80 plus, sorry, 82 plus 13, 95 plus 3, 8%. And the other population is only 2%. So I'm going to take only two respondents from the study for my study. So if it is your sample size is in proportionate with the with the size of the population, then we call it as proportionate. So once you have gone for this stratification, then we are going to have methods by which you are going to gather the information. It involves steps, my dear friends. It involves 5 steps in stratified random sampling. The first one is divide the population units into different subgroups. It may be based on gender, it may be based on caste, class, so on. Second one, list the units separately. How many Hindus are there? How many Christians are there? Separate the list of the population. Third one is assign numbers to all these units. Then select the required number of units from each group or strata by using appropriate simple random sampling techniques. And then consolidate the units from all the subgroups to make the main sample. These are the 5 methods or 5 steps which are involved in terms of selecting the sample, my dear friends. Then go for cluster sampling. The third one is cluster sampling. It involves dividing the population into clusters and drawing a sample of clusters from the total clusters, my dear friends. This method is employed when the area of study is widespread. For example, if you want to conduct a study in Hyderabad also, in the slums, my dear friends, gathering the information from all the areas is also a problematic one. So I'm going to turn Hyderabad into clusters. Like Secunderabad is one cluster, Jubilee Hills, Banjara Hills is one cluster, Patan Cheru is one cluster. Then you go to Koti, that is one cluster. Likewise, I'm going to divide the entire city into different clusters. And from these different clusters, I'm going to select few clusters for my study, which is very, very appropriate. Which is very, very appropriate, my dear friends. Okay. So the clusters are selected for the study which are identical. For example, I want to study the opinion of the people who are staying in the slums, but aspirations of people, whether the aspirations will be the same, beta? No. The people who are residing in the slum nearby Film Nagar, they aspire to act in the film industry. They want to have a small character at least. They want to at least get some side character. They aspire for that. And if there are people who are residing nearby the industrial areas, they aspire to get a job in the industry. So it varies, my dear friends. It will not, the ambitions and aspirations will not be the same. So whenever we are going to select the clusters, we are going to ensure that the clusters must be identical, my dear friends, so that it helps us in getting the similar data for our study. And after the clusters are selected, my dear friends, our duty is to select the respondents from these clusters using stratified random sampling or simple random sampling, my dear friends. Cluster sampling. Then the next one is multi-stage sampling. In the multi-stage sampling, my dear friends, it involves various stages or levels. For example, I want to study the implementation of Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act or scheme, how it is being implemented across the country. So gathering the information from all 28 states and UTs is not that easy. So what I can do is that I can divide the country into 4 zones: northern zone, southern, eastern, and western zone. And from each zone, one state is selected. From each zone, one state is selected for the study. And even gathering the information from one state is also a biggest task. Remember that. So what we do, from northern India, one state; from southern, one state; eastern and western, one state. So we have selected 4 states right now. And from each state, again, we are going to select one district. So from 4 states, 4 districts are selected. And from 4 districts, I'm going to select at least two villages. One village where the Narega scheme is effectively implemented, and the other area which is not affected. So I can know how it is being implemented in a proper way, or why it is not successful in certain villages like. So altogether, from each zone, I'm going to I'm going to select only two villages for my study, and I'm going to apply the results to the entire country, my dear friends. We call it as multi-stage because there are stages, my dear friends. That's the reason why we call it as multi-stage sampling. And the last one is systematic sampling. In the systematic sampling, every nth number, every nth unit is selected for the study. For example, there are 100 people, and I want to gather the information from only 10 respondents or 10 people. There are 100 people, of which I want to select 10 people for my study. So here I'm going to divide 100 divided by 10. That means 10 comes. Isn't it better? So there must be an interval of 10 between each respondent. So if I'm going to select one person, 1, then the next person selected will be 10 plus 1. So there must be a gap of 10 between each respondent. So 11, 21, 31, 41, 51. Likewise, I'm going to select the people for my respondents. If I'm going to start at 5, then 5, 15, 25, 35, 45, and so on. If the interval is only 5, if I'm selecting 1, 6, 11, 16, so on. So there will be a gap of at least 5 respondents. So you are going to take the total population, the number of units to be studied by the sample size, and whatever the interval comes, whatever the number comes, you are going to maintain the same interval in selecting the respondents across your total population, my dear friends. So this is about systematic sampling. In all these 5 types of sampling, remember that each and every respondent has equal chances of being selected, my dear friends. Now let us discuss about the advantages of this probability sampling. The first one is it is scientific method because we are going to use certain procedure for selecting our samples. So there will not be any bias, my dear friends. It will be easy for us to select it. The second one is it is cost effective because we are going to use this method to acquire the sampling units or across the frame. So once you have selected, your work is half done because you know who was selected for your study. So you'll directly go to that person and gather the information. So you're not going to waste the time going here and there, my dear friends. So second one is it is cost effective. Third one is there is no bias in the sample selection because whoever's numbers come or the house number comes or the phone number comes, you're going to pick that person. So there is no researcher's bias at all. Then it is simple method of sampling because it is not going to involve any complex method. The only thing we require is that you need to have the number of people, the list of all the units, and once you have that, based on your study requirement, you will choose either of the 5 sampling methods under probability 1. The next one is it can be done even by a non-technical person because the methods are there, the formulas are there. So you simply use that. Any person, even a layman, can also apply this probability techniques, my dear friends. And the last one is the sample which is selected. It is representative of the population because we are going to use random numbers for selecting the population. Each and every person can be taken into account, my dear friends. But at the same time, my dear friends, this sampling method, probability sampling method, also has its own disadvantages. First one is lack of sufficient information about the population. If you're not going to have the information about the people, about the details, everything, then it is impossible for us to use the probability sampling method. The next one is because if you're not going to have the list of all the units of the population, then you cannot have a sampling frame. Preparing the sampling frame is the most challenging task. In some cases, the sampling frame may be readily available. For example, the list of the voters, or the list of students enrolled in the school, and so on. And in some cases, my dear friends, it is not readily available. We have to put on the efforts to gather the information. For example, I want to study the problems faced by the people who migrated to Arab countries and are returned. So if I go to the embassy, I may have the list of people. I may have the address, but I don't know whether people are residing in the same address or not, whether they are using the same mobile number or not. So gathering the information from them, you may have the list, but where they are residing, how to approach them, sometimes it becomes a difficult task. Remember that. So preparing the sampling frame, sometimes it is readily available, whereas sometimes we have to take the pain in order to gather the information. So these are the two disadvantages in terms of using probability sampling, my dear friends. So in our class today, we have discussed what is sample, when we are going to use sample, why we are going to use sample, and at the same time we also have discussed about probability sampling, its types, its advantages as well as its disadvantages. This will also come in your final examination. And my dear friends, if you have any problems, you're free to ask me. If you have any doubts, my dear friends, you're free to ask. Okay, guys. Then we'll stop today, beta, and we'll continue tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll discuss non probability sampling.
Thank you.
Okay, beta.